What do you do when you go out in the fall and everyone says they're crushing them and power baits and reaction baits are working, but you hit the water and it's crickets? Well, this happens in the fall, probably more than we really want to admit, but many videos out there, and a lot of them that I have done, talk about how good the fall fishing can be, but there are days when you hit the water and it's just like this. For me, these really hard days are when the wind stops and that sun is high in the sky. For example, just a few days ago, the wind was ripping and I was throwing a traditional 5-inch fluke style bait. And I don't want to say that the fishing was easy, but it sure wasn't difficult. I fished the windiest bank that I could find and it was just catch. Well, then the next day I'm like, oh, that was so much fun, I'm going out again. And it was just like this, and it was very difficult. So what do we do as anglers when we're faced with those conditions in the fall? Well, we know that the bass are focused on bait fish, right? We've talked about that a whole bunch. And when things are easy, we're normally fishing this size of a bait fish imitator. But if you really take a look at whether they're minnows or threadfin or whatever is going on in your water, like this particular lake here is really thick with minnows, they're not that big. So when things get very hard and that water is slick, it's so critically important to match the size of that bait, because that is what the bass are used to seeing. And for me, that means from going something like this to something like this, so quite a bit smaller. This particular one here is about the exact same size of all the minnows that are flicking around in the lake. And then depending on the sunshine, whether it's cloudy or not, I might go from, more of a pure silver, a white pearl type of a look to maybe something that's got a little more dark or green on the back, but I'm going to try to keep it as natural as possible. Well, there are a couple of rigs that I immediately go to when it's super difficult like this. 3 of them actually, and I have other videos on each of these that I can link down below in the description section. The first one I'm going to pick up is a drop shot with a very small bait, just like this one is what is going to be on there. Now in the fall, when the conditions are like this, we know in a lot of lakes the grass is dying off, so those bass are probably going to be relating right to the bottom when we have a bluebird sky and no wind. Well, that means on my drop shot, I like to cast them out and bring them back. So let's put a really long leader on here, so as I'm bringing it back horizontally, that bait is staying just off the bottom. That's where most of the bass are hanging out. So that is definitely an excellent go-to presentation when it's really tough in the fall, is a drop shot, small bait, minnow, shad type bait, really long leader, and get it close to the bottom. The other thing that we're going to do, and just the other day when I was out, I switched over to a Ned rig. And oftentimes on the Ned rig, we may take something like a stick bait, right? Well, we're going to want to cut this traditional size. This is actually a 4-inch. Cut it in half and put something smaller on there. But once again, I'm going to go with minnow or shad types of colors. And when I was fishing that Ned rig, when the bites came? When I was doing nothing. Absolutely nothing to it. I'd throw it out there and just leave it sit, and after it sat on the bottom for a little bit, I would just slowly drag it, and the bites were coming almost exclusively when that bait was doing absolutely nothing. I know it's a super difficult way to fish, but if you normally fish quickly, maybe for you leaving it sit there is 5 seconds. If you are able to fish slowly and it doesn't bother you, maybe you leave it sit there for 30 seconds. So depending what you normally do for your fishing style, slow it down a little bit, just to try to slow it down some, and I think you're going to notice a pretty big difference in the results. The other thing I really like to do is swim a small swim bait. That can be a paddle tail, it can be more of the straight tail just like I've got right here, but when it is super slick out and super calm, just mimicking that small little minnow coming through the water column, struggling to get through, you know, and just dying a little bit and then kicking up and dying. So effective. My son was out with me the other day. I was catching them on a Ned rig and he was catching them on this tiny little swim bait on a Damiki head, and they were hitting it really well. But if we put on something more of a traditional power bait or a reaction type of a bait, nothing, absolutely nothing. We had to downsize, we had to fish slowly, and we had to use a lot lighter line, but we saved the day. We had a pretty good late afternoon outing when we did those things. Okay, now here's the million-dollar question, right? Where are we going to start when we decide we need to go finesse and we have to slow down? That means we're not going to be able to cover a lot of water. So where are we going to start? Well, number one, if you can find hard rock or some hard type of bottom composition on your lake, if you're in the northern part of the country and it's been mainly vegetation and now you can find some harder bottom, that is a gold mine for bass to hang on. As a matter of fact, the other day I went out and I hit the two rockiest points on a lake. I had bass on the first cast on each one of them because they are relating to that hard cover. We just had a video on hard cover also being laydowns and docks in the fall, so I'll put that down in the description as well. Now, once you've located that hard cover, that hard bottom composition, once again, keep in mind, you got two types of bass in the fall. You got those that are shallow and are gonna stay shallow, and you've got the ones that are coming up. So either check the backs of coves and pockets to see if they're hanging out back there in those areas, just kind of resting on the bottom, or are they still on that first major depth change as you back out of those coves and pockets, more your traditional ledge fishing. So check those two areas for sure when the conditions are so extremely difficult. The other thing that I like to do when you're just faced with just horribly tough conditions like it is right now is fish whatever shade you can. You got to remember the daytime temps for us are cooling off, but the water is much slower to cool off. Yes, your surface temp may show quite a bit of a change, but down there farther in the water column, it's not going to drop just like that overnight. We feel the change before the fish feel the temperature change. So they're still going to really relate to those shady areas, even if it's technically not that hot out. Remember, they find shade not necessarily to always get out of heat, but to avoid the light penetration. So shade, no matter if it's morning, high noon, afternoon, evening, I'm finding the most shade that I can find. And if I can find shade with hard cover, shade with hard structure, my odds go way up. The other thing that you need to do when you head out and all of a sudden you realize, man, it's going to be tough today, is remember, focus. Change that mindset. Instead of looking at it as, man, I probably won't get any bites today, challenge yourself. If I can get some bites today and catch fish, man, I've just taken my angling to the next level. I don't know about you, but it's very satisfying when I know it's hard out, when I know the conditions are tough. If I can come back to the boat ramp and, you know, I caught 5 good ones on this trip. I am just so pleased that I was able to stay focused, and I know I'm becoming a better angler every time I go out there. So when it's tough, look at it as a challenge. Instead of saying, man, I'm going to catch 20, say, boy, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to get 5 good bites, and I know that I'm a better angler than I was when I launched the boat. If you would like to check out the video on what do we do as anglers when the vegetation dies off, make sure you check out this one right here. I think that you will find it interesting. And hey, don't forget to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.